the 7 industrial dynasties who transformed Manchester, Birmingham and Leeds into empires. The Arkwright family invented the factory system itself. Richard Arkwright was born in Preston, Lancashire, on the 23rd of December 1732, the youngest of 13 children of a tailor. His parents could not afford to send him to school, so his cousin Ellen taught him the basics of reading and writing. After an apprenticeship to a wig maker and barber, he set up his own shop in Bolton. He was, by any measure, an unlikely candidate to be the man who changed the way human beings worked. The invention that changed everything was the water frame, a machine for spinning cotton using rollers rather than fingers, which could be powered by a water wheel rather than human muscle. Arkwright patented the water frame in 1769. In 1771, in partnership with Jedediah Strutt and Samuel Need, hosiery manufacturers whose money made the venture possible, he built the world's first water-powered cotton mill at Cromford in Derbyshire. The mill at Cromford employed approximately 600 workers by the 1770s, including children whose small hands were suited to the intricate work of tending the frames. Arkwright built housing for his workers near the mill, one of the first manufacturers in history to do so, creating what became known as a model industrial village. He then replicated the formula, mill after mill across Lancashire and Derbyshire, each employing hundreds of workers, each powered by water, each producing cotton thread in quantities that were simply impossible to achieve by any previous method. By the 1780s, he was a wealthy man, knighted by the Crown, and recognised as the dominant force in British cotton manufacturing. He had created something entirely new, the factory system itself, the organisation of large numbers of workers in a single large building following set hours determined by machine schedules rather than the rhythms of craft production or agricultural seasons. By the mid-19th century, the model Arkwright created at Cromford had been replicated in thousands of mills across Lancashire, Yorkshire and the Midlands, and the word Manchester had become synonymous in the international imagination with the industrial production of cotton cloth. Josiah Wedgwood turned pottery into a global luxury brand. Josiah Wedgwood was born in 1730 in Burslem, Staffordshire, one of the pottery towns of the English Midlands, in a region then known as the Five Towns and now called the Potteries. He was the 13th child of a potter and inherited from his family both the craft knowledge and the commercial ambition that would eventually transform English pottery from a domestic trade into a global luxury industry. Wedgwood contracted smallpox as a child, which left him with a weakened right leg that was eventually amputated. The physical limitation meant he could not operate a potter's wheel, and redirected his energies toward the design, chemistry, and business management dimensions of the trade. He founded his own pottery business in Burslem in 1759, and within a decade had produced the cream-coloured earthenware he called Queensware, named after Queen Charlotte, who had ordered a complete service of it. The royal warrant was marketing gold. Aristocrats and wealthy consumers across Britain and Europe wanted what the Queen had ordered. Wedgwood understood the commercial power of celebrity and association with social status long before those concepts had names. He's often credited as the inventor of modern marketing. He used techniques including money-back guarantees, free delivery, and what we would now call aspirational advertising to sell his pottery not on its technical characteristics, but on its connection to taste, refinement, and social position. He moved his principal factory to a purpose-built estate he called Etruria in Stoke-on-Trent in 1769. The same year, Arkwright patented the water frame. Etruria employed hundreds of workers and operated as an integrated manufacturing operation. Wedgwood pottery was exported to Russia, France, the Americas, and across the British Empire. His business partner Thomas Bentley managed the London showroom in Greek Street, Soho, where wealthy customers could view and purchase the latest designs. Josiah Wedgwood was also a committed abolitionist. He produced the famous medallion showing a kneeling enslaved man with the inscription, "Am I not a man and a brother?" which became one of the most reproduced images of the anti-slavery movement. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming content about the United Kingdom and its history. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue. Matthew Boulton and James Watt built Birmingham into the engine room of empire. The partnership between Matthew Boulton, a Birmingham manufacturer, and James Watt, a Scottish instrument maker and inventor, produced the machine on which the entire Industrial Revolution ultimately ran. Watt had been improving upon Thomas Newcomen's atmospheric steam engine since the 1760s, working to develop a more efficient design. His critical insight was the separate condenser, a device that allowed steam to be cooled outside the main cylinder, dramatically reducing the energy wasted in each cycle and making the engine economically viable for a far wider range of industrial applications. Watt had neither the capital nor the manufacturing capacity to bring his invention to commercial scale. Matthew Boulton did. Boulton was born in Birmingham in 1728 and had inherited his father's small metal stamping business, which he developed over the following decades into the Soho manufactory on the outskirts of Birmingham, one of the largest industrial establishments in Britain, employing approximately 1,000 workers by the 1770s in the manufacture of buttons, buckles, boxes, and other metal goods. When Boulton met Watt and grasped the commercial potential of the improved steam engine, he provided the capital, the manufacturing infrastructure, and the commercial network to bring it to market. The partnership of Boulton and Watt was formalised in 1775. By the 1790s, Boulton and Watt engines were operating in mines across Cornwall, in factories across the Midlands and the north of England, and in workshops from Scotland to the West Indies. The partnership supplied engines on a rental model that charged customers a proportion of the fuel savings their engine achieved compared to the Newcomen engines it replaced, a pricing innovation that was itself a commercial invention of considerable ingenuity. Birmingham became the centre of metal manufacturing in Britain, producing the components, valves, pipes, cylinders, gears, and fittings that every other industry required. The Lunar Society, the informal gathering of scientists, industrialists, and intellectuals that met monthly in Birmingham during the period of the partnership, included Boulton, Watt, Wedgwood, the chemist Joseph Priestley, the physician Erasmus Darwin, and the engineer John Wilkinson among its members. The society represents the most concentrated gathering of industrial and intellectual talent in the history of the British Enlightenment. The Strutt family built a dynasty on cotton and worker welfare. Jedediah Strutt was born in 1726 in South Normanton, Derbyshire, and began his working life as a farmer before turning to the hosiery trade. His most significant early invention was the Derby rib machine, a device that allowed stockings to be manufactured with a ribbed texture on the standard knitting frame, which he patented in 1759 and which generated enough income to establish him as a significant commercial figure in the Midlands textile trade. It was this commercial position that brought him into contact and partnership with Richard Arkwright in the 1770s, when Strutt and his partner Samuel Need provided the capital that made Arkwright's Cromford mill possible. But Strutt's own contribution to the Industrial Revolution went beyond partnership with Arkwright. His sons William, George and Joseph built cotton mills at Belper and Milford in Derbyshire that became among the most technically advanced and socially progressive industrial establishments in Britain. The Strutt mills at Belper employed hundreds of workers and were built with a level of structural sophistication unusual for the period. Fire-resistant construction using iron columns and brick vaulting, which set new standards for industrial architecture. The family also built housing, schools and bathhouses for their workers, a paternalistic model that influenced the later development of industrial welfare across Britain. The Strutt family remained prominent in Derbyshire commercial and social life for multiple generations. Their mills at Belper continued in production until the 20th century. The North Mill at Belper, built by William Strutt in 1804, is today a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of the Derwent Valley Mills Complex, a designation that recognises the valley's foundational role in the development of the factory system. The Strutt family's technical contribution, particularly William Strutt's fire-resistant construction techniques, influenced industrial building across Britain and eventually across the world. Titus Salt built an entire town for his workers in Yorkshire. Titus Salt was born in 1783 in Morley, Yorkshire, the son of a wool dealer. He entered the wool trade as a young man and built his business in Bradford, which by the 1840s had become the undisputed centre of the British wool textile industry. Bradford's prosperity rested on worsted cloth, a smooth-surfaced wool fabric used in men's clothing, and on the ability of its manufacturers to process raw wool from Australia, South America and South Africa into finished cloth for markets across the world. Salt's commercial breakthrough came in 1836 when he discovered a large stock of Donskoy wool from Russia, considered unusable by other Bradford merchants because of its unusual coarseness, and found a way to spin and weave it profitably. His success with the Donskoy wool gave him the capital and the reputation to expand. His further innovation was the introduction of alpaca fibre, the wool of South American camelids, which produced a lustrous, lightweight fabric into the Bradford textile industry in the 1840s, creating an entirely new product that became fashionable across Europe. By the early 1850s, salt was one of the wealthiest manufacturers in Britain. In 1851, at the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park, Salt decided to build a new mill. Not merely a larger mill, but a completely new town. The project that resulted, Saltaire, completed in 1876, was an entire planned community built beside the River Aire near Bradford, a mill that was at the time the largest in the world, together with 805 houses, schools, a hospital, bathhouses, a church, almshouses, and public parks. Everything a community needed. No public house. Salt was a teetotaler. Saltaire was the most ambitious paternalistic industrial project in Victorian Britain, and became the model for the model villages and garden cities that followed across the following half-century. It is today a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Sir Titus Salt, as he became after being created a baronet in 1869, died in 1876, the year the project he had spent a quarter-century building was completed. The Peel family built cotton and politics into a prime ministerial dynasty. Robert Peel was born in 1788 in Bury, Lancashire, the son and grandson of cotton manufacturers who had made enormous fortunes from the mechanisation of cotton spinning. His grandfather, also Robert Peel, had been among the early pioneers of the cotton printing trade. His father, Sir Robert Peel, the first baronet, built a manufacturing empire that employed thousands of workers across the Lancashire mills and amassed sufficient wealth to purchase a landed estate, buy his son a seat in Parliament at the age of 21, and establish the Peel family as one of the most commercially powerful in England. The son, Robert Peel, entered Parliament in 1809 and never looked back. He served as Chief Secretary for Ireland, as Home Secretary, in which capacity he established the Metropolitan Police in 1829, whose officers were nicknamed Peelers and then Bobbies in his honour, and twice as Prime Minister. As Prime Minister from 1841 to 1846, Peel faced the defining crisis of his era, the Irish famine. His response, purchasing Indian maize from America to distribute in Ireland and ultimately repealing the corn laws that kept grain prices artificially high, split the Conservative Party he led and destroyed his government. He was outvoted in the Commons on the night his Irish Coercion Bill passed and resigned immediately. He died in 1850 following a fall from his horse in Hyde Park. His political legacy was immense. The repeal of the Corn Laws established free trade as the governing principle of British economic policy for the following half-century, and the organisation he left behind became the foundation of the modern Conservative Party. The Peel family moved from the cotton mills of Lancashire to the highest offices of the British state in 3 generations, a trajectory of social mobility that had no precedent in the history of the English manufacturing class. The Crossley family carpeted Britain and then built a model village. The Crossley family of Halifax, Yorkshire, built their fortune in carpets. John Crossley established a small carpet manufacturing business in Deanclough, Halifax in 1782. His sons, John II, Joseph, and Francis Crossley, expanded the business dramatically in the 1830s and 1840s, introducing power looms for carpet manufacture that transformed what had been a skilled craft into a mechanised industrial process. The timing was perfect. The expansion of the British middle class in the Victorian period created enormous demand for carpets as markers of household comfort and respectability. Deanclough Mills, the vast carpet manufacturing complex the family built in Halifax, became the largest carpet manufacturing facility in the world, employing thousands of workers and producing carpets that were exported to Europe, North America, Australia, and across the British Empire. The Crossley family used their commercial success to establish themselves as the dominant philanthropic force in Halifax. Francis Crossley, the most publicly prominent of the brothers, served as Liberal Member of Parliament for the West Riding of Yorkshire, and later for Halifax, and devoted substantial portions of his fortune to public amenities in the town. The People's Park in Halifax, designed by Joseph Paxton, the landscape architect who designed the Crystal Palace, was funded entirely by Francis Crossley and donated to the people of Halifax in 1857. The almshouses Francis Crossley built in the West Hill Park area of Halifax in the 1860s were among the most ambitious worker housing projects of the Victorian era, providing quality accommodation for elderly workers and their families in a planned residential development that anticipated the Garden City movement of the following century. Deanclough Mills continued in production until the 1980s, when the carpet industry collapsed under competition from synthetic fibres and overseas manufacturing. The mill complex was subsequently redeveloped as a business and arts centre and remains one of the largest Victorian industrial buildings still in use in Britain.